The morning sun painted the mountains gold as Violet Brennan stared out her kitchen window. She held a cup of coffee in both hands, feeling its warmth against her palms. The view was beautiful. Pine trees covered the slopes. A small river ran through the valley below. Birds sang their morning songs. But Violet barely noticed any of it. She was 48 years old now. Her hair had more gray than brown these days. Lines marked the corners of her eyes, lines that came from worry, not laughter. 10 years ago, she had been Detective Violet Brennan of the Metro City Police Department. 10 years ago, her life had been completely different. Violet took a sip of coffee and tried not to think about those days. But the memories always came, especially in the quiet morning hours. She remembered the feeling of her badge in her pocket, the weight of her gun on her hip, the adrenaline of chasing suspects, the satisfaction of solving cases and helping people. Most of all, she remembered the last case, the one that ended everything. She shook her head quickly, trying to push the thoughts away. That was the past. This was now. She lived in Pinewood now, a small mountain town far from the city. Far from the noise, the crime, the danger. Far from everything that reminded her of who she used to be. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She picked it up and saw a message from her boss, Martha Green. Morning, Violet. Don't forget we have the planning meeting today at 10 a.m. Big Spring Festival coming up. See you soon. Violet smiled a little. Martha was always cheerful, always excited about something. She ran Pinewood Party Planning, a small company that organized events for the town. Violet had been working there for 3 years now. It was simple work, decorating venues, helping with children's parties, sometimes dressing up as a clown or a fairy or a princess. It was nothing like being a detective, nothing like solving crimes and catching criminals. But that was exactly what Violet wanted. Simple, safe, quiet. She finished her coffee and got ready for work. She put on jeans and a comfortable sweater. No uniform, no badge, no gun. Just regular clothes for a regular person with a regular job. The drive to Martha's office took 15 minutes. Pinewood was a small town with just over 5,000 permanent residents. But it was a beautiful place, surrounded by mountains and forests. Tourists loved it, especially in spring and summer. They came to hike the trails, fish in the streams, and enjoy the fresh mountain air. Martha's office was above the old bakery on Main Street. Violet could smell fresh bread as she climbed the stairs. The office was bright and colorful, with posters of past events covering the walls. Balloons hung from the ceiling. Streamers decorated the doorways. It looked like a party was always happening here. Violet. There you are, Martha called out. She was a round woman in her 60s with curly red hair and glasses on a chain around her neck. Come in, come in. Coffee? I just had some, thanks, Violet said, taking a seat at the conference table. 3 other people were already there. Tom, a young man with a beard who handled sound and lighting. Sarah, a college student who helped with decorations. And David, an older gentleman who managed logistics and transportation. Good morning, everyone, Martha said, clapping her hands together. I'm so excited about this year's spring festival. It's going to be the biggest one yet. She pulled up a presentation on her laptop. The screen showed a colorful poster. Pinewood Spring Festival, April 15th to 21st. Music, food, fun for the whole family.
We have 7 days of events, Martha explained. Opening ceremony on Monday evening, craft fair on Tuesday and Wednesday, Children's Day on Thursday. That's where you come in, Violet. Street parade on Friday, garden show on Saturday, and the big concert on Sunday to close everything out. Violet nodded. She would be working most days, but especially on Children's Day. That was when she wore the clown costume and entertained kids with balloon animals and magic tricks. We're expecting even more tourists than usual, Martha continued. The tourism board has been advertising heavily. Hotels are already almost fully booked. Tom raised his hand. What about security? With so many people, we should have a good plan. Chief Morrison and the police department will handle that, Martha said. They're hiring extra officers for the week. But yes, We all need to keep our eyes open. Safety first, always. Violet felt a small twist in her stomach at the mention of police and security. Old instincts stirred. She pushed them down. The meeting continued for another hour. They discussed schedules, supply lists, setup times, and emergency procedures. Violet took notes on her phone. When the meeting ended, everyone left except Martha and Violet. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Martha asked, her voice softer now. "Of course," Violet said. Martha sat down across from her. "I want to make sure you're okay with all this. I know crowds can be difficult for you sometimes." Violet appreciated Martha's concern. Her boss was one of the few people in Pinewood who knew about her past. Not all the details, but enough to understand that Violet had left a difficult job and needed a quieter life. "I'll be fine," Violet said. "It's just a festival. Kids and families. Nothing to worry about." Martha smiled. "Good. You're one of my best workers, Violet. The kids love you. That clown costume brings so much joy." After they finished talking, Violet left the office and walked down Main Street. Pinewood was already preparing for the festival. Shop owners were hanging flower baskets. The town square was being cleaned and painted. Workers were setting up the stage for concerts. Violet stopped at the coffee shop and bought a sandwich for lunch. She sat by the window and watched people walk by. She recognized most of them. This was a small town, after all. Mrs. Chen, who ran the Chinese restaurant. Officer Bradley, one of the local police officers. The Williams family with their 3 young children. Everyone seemed happy and excited about the festival. Violet wanted to feel the same way, but something nagged at the back of her mind. An old feeling. A detective's intuition that said something wasn't quite right. She finished her sandwich and walked back to her car. On the way, she noticed a group of men standing near the information center. Tourists, probably. There was nothing unusual about them. 3 men, maybe in their 30s or 40s. They wore normal clothes, jeans, jackets, baseball caps. One of them was looking at a map. Another was taking pictures. Normal tourist behavior. Nothing suspicious. But Violet's eyes lingered on them for a moment longer than necessary. Something about the way they stood. The way they looked around. It reminded her of surveillance techniques she had learned at the police academy. She shook her head. She was being paranoid. Not everyone was a criminal. Not every stranger was dangerous. That was old thinking, detective thinking. She wasn't a detective anymore. Violet got in her car and drove home. She spent the afternoon preparing her clown supplies, balloons, magic props, face paint, simple things for simple entertainment. But that evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, she couldn't stop thinking about those 3 men, their posture, their awareness of their surroundings, the way one of them had been writing in a small notebook. "Tourists don't usually take notes," her detective brain whispered. "Stop it," Violet said out loud to herself. "You're not a cop anymore. Let it go." But deep down, she knew she couldn't. Some instincts never truly go away. Some skills, once learned, become part of who you are forever. That night, Violet had trouble sleeping. She kept seeing flashes of memory from 10 years ago. The case that broke her, the moment when everything went wrong, the sound of gunfire, the screaming, the blood. She woke up at 3 a.m, breathing hard, her heart pounding. It took several minutes for her to calm down. She got up, drank some water, and sat by the window until dawn. Tomorrow, the festival preparations would continue. In a few days, Children's Day would arrive, and she would put on her clown costume and make kids laugh. That was her job now. That was her life. She just hoped the nightmares would leave her alone. The week before the festival passed quickly. Violet was busy every day, helping Martha and the team with preparations. They hung banners across Main Street. They set up booths in the town square. They tested sound systems and arranged chairs for the concerts. Pinewood filled up with visitors. The hotels were packed. The restaurants had waiting lists. The parking lots overflowed with cars from out of town. The festival hadn't even officially started yet, but the town was already buzzing with energy. On Sunday evening, Violet stopped by the town square to check on the setup for the opening ceremony the next day. The stage looked good. Rows of chairs faced it. Lights were strung between the trees. Everything was ready. As she walked around, making sure nothing was out of place, she noticed those three men again. They were sitting at the outdoor tables near the coffee shop. Same men she had seen earlier in the week. Same casual clothes. Same careful awareness of everything around them. One of them was drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. Another was on his phone. The third was simply watching people walk by. Violet walked past them slowly, pretending to check her own phone. She tried to hear what they were saying, but they weren't talking. They just sat there, observing. When she was about 20 feet away, she turned and looked back. The man with the newspaper glanced up and met her eyes for just a second. Then he went back to his paper. But in that second, Violet saw something. Recognition. Not of her specifically, but of what she was doing. He knew she had been watching them. He knew because he was trained to notice these things. Violet's pulse quickened. She forced herself to keep walking normally. She got in her car and drove home, but her mind was racing. Those men weren't tourists. She was sure of it now. Tourists don't have that kind of awareness. Tourists don't notice when someone is watching them. Tourists don't have the calm, controlled body language of people who are trained in surveillance. But what were they doing in Pinewood? What were they watching? Why were they here for the festival? When Violet got home, she made dinner, but barely tasted it. Her detective brain was fully awake now, analyzing everything she had observed. She thought about calling the local police. Chief Morrison was a good man, and his department was professional. But what would she tell them? I saw three men sitting at a coffee shop. That wasn't a crime. She had no evidence of anything wrong. Maybe they were federal agents, watching for something. Or private investigators on a case. Or security contractors hired by someone. There could be a dozen legitimate reasons for their presence. Or maybe she really was being paranoid. Maybe her trauma was making her see threats where none existed. Violet went to bed early, but again, she couldn't sleep well. She kept thinking about the festival, about all the children who would be there, about all the crowds. If something was wrong, if those men were planning something, Children's Day would be the perfect opportunity. Hundreds of kids, busy parents, general chaos, number. She was letting her imagination run wild. Nothing was going to happen. The festival would be fine. The next morning, Monday, the spring festival officially began. The opening ceremony was beautiful. Mayor Richardson gave a speech welcoming everyone to Pinewood. A local high school band played music. Children released colorful balloons into the sky. The crowd cheered and applauded. Violet wasn't working the ceremony. Martha had other staff handling it. But she attended anyway, standing at the back of the crowd, watching everything. And watching those three men. They were there, scattered through the crowd. Not standing together, but positioned at different points, each with a good view of the entire square. Professional spacing. Military or law enforcement training, definitely. Violet moved closer to the nearest one, the man with the newspaper from before. She pretended to be interested in a nearby vendor's booth, but she was really listening. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Violet strained to hear over the crowd noise. Yeah, I'm at the square. Lots of families. I count maybe 200 people. Kids everywhere. He paused. Tomorrow's the craft fair. Should be similar numbers. Thursday is the big one, the children's event. Yes, I'll keep watching. No problem so far. He ended the call and put his phone away. Violet's heart pounded. He was counting people, counting children, reporting to someone. This wasn't normal tourist behavior. This wasn't even normal security contractor behavior. She needed to know more, but she couldn't just walk up and ask him what he was doing. She needed to be smart about this. The ceremony ended, and the crowd began to disperse. The three men left separately, walking in different directions. Violet followed the one who had made the phone call. She stayed far back, using the crowd for cover. He walked down Main Street, past the shops and restaurants. He stopped occasionally, looking in windows, acting like a casual visitor. But Violet could see through it. He was observing, noting locations, mapping the town. He entered the small shopping mall, really just a collection of local stores under one roof. Violet waited a minute, then followed. She saw him standing near the children's play area, watching kids play while their parents shopped. He took out his phone and pretended to check it, but Violet saw him angle it toward the play area. He was taking pictures. Her stomach tightened. Why would he photograph children? She walked past him, keeping her face turned away. She went to a nearby store and bought a bottle of water she didn't need, just to have a reason to be there. When she came out, he was gone. Violet searched the mall but couldn't find him. She went outside and looked around. Nothing. He had vanished into the crowd. She stood on the sidewalk trying to calm her breathing. Every instinct she had was screaming that something was wrong. These men were planning something involving children. But what? And how could she stop it when she had no proof, no evidence, nothing but a gut feeling and some suspicious behavior? She thought about her old life. As a detective, she would have run background checks on these men. She would have put them under official surveillance. She would have had resources, backup, authority. Now she had none of that. She was just a woman who dressed up as a clown and made balloon animals for children's parties. Violet walked back to her car. Her hands shook a little as she unlocked the door. She sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, trying to decide what to do. Finally, she pulled out her phone and called Martha. "Hi, Violet. How was the ceremony?" Martha's cheerful voice came through. "It was nice," Violet said. "Listen, Martha, I have a question. Do we have any kind of security plan for Children's Day? I mean, specific procedures for keeping kids safe?" "Oh, sure. Chief Morrison's department is handling that. They'll have officers at all the activity areas. Plus, we're giving out wristbands with parent contact information for any child under 12. Why do you ask?" "Just thinking ahead," Violet said. "Lots of kids, busy parents. I want to make sure nothing goes wrong." "You're sweet to worry," Martha said, "but we've got it covered. This is our 10th festival, remember? We know what we're doing." "Right, of course. Thanks, Martha." They said goodbye, and Violet ended the call. Martha's confidence didn't reassure her. Martha was an event planner, not a security expert. She thought about crowds and decorations and schedules. She didn't think about predators and criminals and danger, but Violet did. She always had. The rest of Monday passed without incident. The craft fair on Tuesday and Wednesday was busy but peaceful. Violet helped Martha with some setup work, but mostly she watched. She saw the three men several times, always separate, always observing, always focused on areas where children gathered. By Wednesday evening, Violet knew she couldn't ignore this anymore. She had to do something, but she still didn't know what. That night, she made a decision. Tomorrow was Children's Day. She would be there in her clown costume, entertaining kids, but she would also be watching those men. And if they made any suspicious moves, if they got too close to any child, she would act. She wasn't a detective anymore. She didn't have a badge or a gun, but she still had her training, her skills, her instincts, and she still knew how to protect people. Thursday morning arrived with perfect weather: clear blue sky, warm sunshine, a gentle breeze. Perfect for an outdoor children's festival. Violet arrived at the town square early to help set up. The team had created different activity zones. There was a face painting booth, a balloon animal station, a small petting zoo with gentle animals like rabbits and goats, a storytelling corner, various games and crafts, a stage for puppet shows and magic performances. By 9 o'clock, families were already arriving: parents with young children, grandparents with grandkids, school groups. The square filled up quickly with the sounds of excited children. Violet changed into her clown costume in the portable changing room Martha had set up. The costume was colorful, but not scary. Rainbow wig, red nose, oversized polka dot jumpsuit, big colorful shoes. When children saw her, they laughed and smiled. She was good at this job. She knew how to make kids happy. But today, she had a second job, a secret job. She would be watching for those 3 men. Martha came over as Violet was putting on her makeup. "You look great. Ready for a busy day?" "Always," Violet said, applying the final touches of face paint. "Remember, Officer Bradley and Officer Chen will be circulating through the crowd," Martha said, "and we have volunteers at every station. If you need anything, just wave someone down." "Got it." Violet stepped out into the square in full costume. Immediately, a group of children ran up to her, laughing and asking for balloon animals. She smiled her clown smile and got to work, twisting balloons into dogs, swords, flowers, and hats. But while her hands worked, her eyes scanned the crowd. She was looking for those 3 men. She spotted the first one within 10 minutes. He was standing near the petting zoo, watching children interact with the animals. He wore different clothes today, a gray hoodie and jeans, but she recognized his face and his posture. The second man appeared shortly after, near the face painting booth. Same watchful stance, same careful observation. Violet's pulse quickened. Where was the third man? She kept making balloon animals, moving through the crowd, entertaining children. All the while, she tracked the 2 men she could see. They were positioned at opposite ends of the square. Good coverage of the entire area. Classic surveillance positioning. Then she saw the third man. He was near the entrance to the square, where families were still arriving. He had positioned himself so he could see everyone coming in. Violet's detective brain analyzed the setup. 3 men, triangulated positions, watching all the entry and exit points. They were monitoring the crowd. But for what purpose? An hour passed. Then 2. The festival was in full swing. Children ran and played. Parents chatted and took pictures. The puppet show on the stage drew a big crowd. Everything seemed normal and happy. But Violet watched, and she noticed things. The 3 men were paying special attention to certain children. Not all children, specific ones. They would watch a particular child for several minutes, sometimes taking quick photos with their phones. Then they would note something down or send a text message. Violet tried to see what the children had in common. Different ages, from about 6 to 12 years old. Different genders, different families. What was the pattern? Then she realized these children were relatively unattended. Their parents were nearby but distracted. Or the children had wandered a bit away from their parents. Or they were in groups with other kids, but without close adult supervision. The men were identifying vulnerable targets. Violet's blood ran cold. This wasn't just surveillance. This was targeting. They were selecting children, planning something.
But what? Kidnapping seemed most likely, but why? For ransom? Human trafficking? Something even worse? She needed to act, but carefully. If she confronted the men directly, they might run, or they might be dangerous. She had no weapon, no backup, no authority. She needed help. She looked around for Officer Bradley. She spotted him near the storytelling corner, chatting with some parents. She started walking toward him, still in character as the clown, smiling and waving at children along the way. But before she reached the officer, she saw something that made her stop cold. One of the men, the one near the petting zoo, was talking to a little girl. She looked about 8 years old, with blonde pigtails and a pink dress. She was alone, looking at the animals. Her parents were nowhere in sight. The man crouched down to her level, smiling, saying something. The girl looked uncertain but responded. He pointed toward the parking area, away from the crowd. No, 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 no. Violet's body moved before her mind could fully process what to do. She walked quickly toward them, staying in character, making exaggerated clown movements. Other children saw her and followed, creating a small parade of kids. Hi there, friends, Violet called out in her clown voice, high-pitched and cheerful. Who wants balloon animals? The children, including the little girl in pink, turned toward her. The man stood up quickly, his friendly expression vanishing for just a moment before he forced it back. I want one, the little girl said, running toward Violet. Of course, sweetie, Violet said. She glanced at the man. He was backing away, disappearing into the crowd. Good. Violet made the girl a balloon butterfly, all the while looking around for the girl's parents. What's your name, honey? She asked. Emma. That's a beautiful name. Where's your mommy or daddy, Emma? They're at the food tents. They said I could look at the animals while they got lunch. Well, let's go find them, okay? I'll walk with you. Violet took Emma's hand and led her toward the food area. She could feel her heart pounding, her old training kicking in. She had just stopped a potential abduction. But the men were still here, and they probably had other targets. She found Emma's parents, a young couple with a baby in a stroller. They were relieved to see Emma and thanked Violet for bringing her back. Violet smiled and waved, staying in character, but her mind was racing. She needed to talk to the police. Now, she found Officer Bradley near the main stage. She walked up to him, still in full clown costume, and said in a low voice, Officer, I need to speak with you privately. It's urgent. He looked surprised but nodded. They walked to a quieter area behind the stage. Violet quickly explained what she had seen. The three men, their surveillance, their interest in unattended children, the interaction with Emma. Officer Bradley listened carefully. Can you point these men out to me? They walked back to where Violet could see the square. She scanned the crowd. There, the man from the petting zoo was now near the balloon station. There, another man by the entrance, but where was the third? There and there, she pointed discreetly. The one in the gray hoodie and the one in the blue jacket by the entrance. There's a third, but I don't see him right now. Officer Bradley studied the men. They look like regular people to me. What exactly did the one say to the little girl? I don't know. I got there before I could hear, but his body language was wrong. He was luring her away from the crowd. Officer Bradley looked at her carefully. Martha told me you used to be in law enforcement. Is that right? Violet hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I was a detective in Metro City. And you think these men are dangerous? I know they are. I've been watching them all week. They're not tourists, they're professionals. And today, they're specifically targeting children. Officer Bradley pulled out his radio. Let me call Chief Morrison. We'll look into this. He spoke into the radio, explaining the situation. Then he turned back to Violet. The chief is on his way. Can you stay here and keep watching them? Don't approach them yourself. I won't, Violet promised. But she knew she would if she had to. If any child was in danger, she wouldn't hesitate. Officer Bradley moved away to watch the men from another angle. Violet went back to entertaining children, but she kept her eyes on the targets. The man in the gray hoodie was moving toward the craft tables. The one by the entrance was still in position. Where was the third? Then she saw him. He was near the restrooms, a small building at the edge of the square. And he was talking to a boy, maybe 10 years old, who was alone. Violet moved quickly. She juggled some small balls as she walked, drawing attention, making it look natural. Children gathered around her, including the boy the man had been talking to. Hey, kids! Want to see a magic trick? She called out. The man backed away again, but this time he didn't disappear. He stood at a distance, watching her, and Violet saw something in his eyes. Anger, frustration. He knew what she was doing. He knew she was interfering. Chief Morrison arrived a few minutes later, a big man in his 50s with a serious face. Officer Bradley briefed him, and they both approached Violet. Miss Brennan, the chief said, Bradley told me about your concerns. I've got officers watching these three men now, but I need to be honest. We can't arrest people for standing around and watching. Do you have anything more concrete? Any evidence of actual crime? Violet wanted to scream in frustration. She knew what these men were planning. She knew they were dangerous. But the chief was right. Watching children wasn't a crime. Talking to them wasn't a crime, not unless it crossed into clear territory of attempted abduction or assault. They're working together, she said. Coordinated surveillance. They're selecting targets, children who are alone or poorly supervised. One of them tried to lead a girl away from the crowd if I hadn't intervened. But you did intervene, Chief Morrison said. And that's good. Look, I believe you. I trust your instincts. You have law enforcement experience, and I respect that. But my hands are tied until they actually do something illegal. So we wait for them to kidnap a child? Violet said, her voice rising. No, the chief said firmly. We watch them closely. I've got 4 officers here now, all alert. These men can't make a move without us seeing it. And I'm going to approach them, ask them some questions, let them know we're aware of them. That might help, Violet thought. Or it might just make them leave town and try somewhere else. Chief Morrison walked toward the man in the gray hoodie. Violet watched as he introduced himself, showed his badge, and began asking questions. She was too far away to hear the conversation, but she could read body language. The man was calm, cooperative. He handed over an ID, he answered questions. He even smiled. It would have to be enough. Violet went back to her job, entertaining children, making balloon animals, performing small magic tricks. But she was exhausted from the stress and tension. Every time she saw one of those men, her heart raced. The afternoon wore on. The sun began to sink lower. Families started leaving, heading back to their hotels or homes. The crowd thinned out. No, the chief said firmly. We watch them closely. I've got 4 officers here now, all alert. These men can't make a move without us seeing it. And I'm going to approach them, ask them some questions, let them know we're aware of them. That might help, Violet thought. Or it might just make them leave town and try somewhere else. Chief Morrison walked toward the man in the gray hoodie. Violet watched as he introduced himself, showed his badge, and began asking questions. She was too far away to hear the conversation, but she could read body language. The man was calm, cooperative. He handed over an ID. He answered questions. He even smiled. After a few minutes, Chief Morrison came back to Violet. His name is Marcus Webb. He's from Seattle. He says he's here on vacation, enjoying the festival. He has no criminal record. I ran his ID, perfectly clean. That doesn't mean anything, Violet said. Professional criminals can have clean records, especially if they've never been caught. I know, the chief said, but it means I can't arrest him. I talked to the other 2 as well. Similar stories, no records, nothing illegal. Violet felt helpless. She could see the danger, but she couldn't prove it. Not yet. Keep watching them, she said. Please, I know I'm right about this. We will, Chief Morrison promised. Every officer on duty today knows to keep an eye on these 3. They won't get near any child without us noticing. It would have to be enough. Violet went back to her job, entertaining children, making balloon animals, performing small magic tricks. But she was exhausted from the stress and tension. Every time she saw one of those men, her heart raced. The afternoon wore on. The sun began to sink lower. Families started leaving, heading back to their hotels or homes. The crowd thinned out.
And the 3 men left as well, separately, disappearing into the town. When Children's Day officially ended at 6 o'clock, Violet helped Martha and the team clean up. They collected trash, broke down decorations, packed supplies. Everyone was tired but happy. It had been a successful event. Everyone except Violet. She felt defeated. Those men were still out there, still planning something, and she had no way to stop them. Martha came over as Violet was loading boxes into a van. "Hey, you okay? You seem stressed." "Just tired," Violet said. "You did great today. The kids loved you, and I heard you helped that little girl find her parents. That was sweet." "Just part of the job." Martha squeezed her shoulder. "Get some rest." "We've got the parade tomorrow, then the garden show, then the concert. 3 more busy days." 3 more days for something to go wrong, Violet thought. She drove home as the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple. She should have felt proud. She had protected Emma and at least one other child today. She had alerted the police. She had done what she could, but it didn't feel like enough. That night, Violet couldn't eat dinner. She sat on her porch, watching the stars come out, thinking about those 3 men, Marcus Webb from Seattle, and 2 others whose names she didn't even know. What were they planning? Why were they here? What did they want with those children? And most important, how could she stop them? Around midnight, Violet made a decision. She couldn't just sit and wait. She needed more information. She needed to investigate, the way she used to as a detective. She went inside and opened her laptop. She started with Marcus Webb. She searched his name online, looking for any information she could find: social media profiles, news articles, public records. She found a Facebook profile. It showed a smiling man in his 30s. The profile was sparse, just a few photos, no personal information, no posts. A fake profile, probably. Just enough to look legitimate if someone checked. She tried the other names the chief had mentioned: Richard Lane and Stephen Curtis. Similar sparse profiles. No real information, no real presence. These were not real identities, or at least not their actual identities. These men were using cover names. Violet's detective instincts were screaming now. Everything pointed to a coordinated professional operation. But what kind? And organized by whom? She thought about the most likely scenarios. Kidnapping for ransom was possible, but unlikely in a place like Pinewood. The families here weren't particularly wealthy. Human trafficking was more likely. Kidnappers who took children and sold them into slavery or worse. Or maybe something else entirely. Whatever it was going to happen soon. The festival was almost over. If the men were planning something, they were running out of time. Violet worked on her laptop until 2 in the morning, searching for anything that might help. Then, exhausted, she fell asleep on her couch. She dreamed of her old life, of the last case, of the moment everything went wrong. And she woke up knowing what she had to do. Friday morning, Violet woke with a headache and a determination that burned like fire in her chest. She had spent half the night researching, thinking, planning, and she had reached a conclusion. If the police couldn't act without solid evidence, she would get that evidence herself. She was going to investigate these men properly, the way a detective would. It was dangerous. It was probably foolish. She had no badge, no authority, no backup, but she also had skills that most people didn't. She knew how to follow suspects without being noticed. She knew how to gather information. She knew how to think like a criminal. And most importantly, she had something the local police didn't have. She could operate without the constraints of law enforcement procedures. She couldn't arrest anyone, but she could bend rules that police couldn't bend. Violet made coffee and sat down with a notebook. She wrote down everything she knew. 3 suspects. Marcus Webb, likely false name. Richard Lane, likely false name. Stephen Curtis, likely false name. All claimed to be tourists from different cities. no criminal records, professional surveillance training, coordinated operation. Their behavior arrived in Pinewood approximately 5 to 7 days before festival, systematically observing children's areas, taking notes and photos, identifying vulnerable targets, unsupervised children, attempted to lure at least one child away, left when police started watching them. Next festival events: Friday, street parade, today. Saturday, garden show. Sunday, closing concert. The parade would have lots of children and lots of chaos. It would be another opportunity for the men. Violet needed to find them before the parade started and follow them, see where they went, what they did when they weren't at the festival. She checked the time. 7:30 a.m. The parade started at 2 p.m. She had time. Violet dressed in plain clothes, jeans, a gray hoodie, sunglasses, a baseball cap. She looked like any other tourist. She grabbed a small backpack with some supplies: water, snacks, her phone, a small notebook, and a camera with a zoom lens. Then she drove into town. Pinewood had 3 hotels and several bed and breakfast inns. The men were probably staying at one of them. Violet started with the largest hotel, the Pinewood Lodge. She parked in the public lot nearby and walked to a coffee shop across the street, where she had a good view of the hotel entrance. She ordered coffee and a muffin and sat by the window. Then she watched. She didn't have to wait long. At 8:15, one of the men, Richard Lane, came out of the hotel. He wore jogging clothes and started running down the street. Violet quickly paid for her coffee and followed him on foot. She stayed far back, keeping other pedestrians between them. Lane ran through the town, past shops and houses, toward the trail that led into the forest. He was getting exercise, but he was also studying the area. Violet could tell by the way he looked around, noting streets and landmarks. He ran for about 40 minutes, then circled back to the hotel. Violet didn't follow him all the way. Instead, she returned to her observation point at the coffee shop. At 9:20, Marcus Webb came out. He walked to a nearby diner and had breakfast. Violet watched from across the street. Webb ate slowly, reading something on his phone. When he finished, he walked around town for another hour, seemingly window shopping but actually casing locations. Stephen Curtis emerged at 10:30. He went to a car rental place and picked up a vehicle, a gray minivan. Violet quickly noted the license plate number. Then Curtis drove the minivan back to the hotel and parked it in the lot. He went inside. A minivan. Why would a single man rent a minivan? Violet felt her stomach turn. A minivan was the kind of vehicle you'd use to transport multiple people, multiple children. She waited another hour, but the men didn't come back out. They were probably in their rooms, planning. The parade started at 2 p.m. They would likely show up then. Violet drove home and changed into her work clothes. Today she wasn't dressing as a clown. Martha had her helping with parade logistics. She would be walking alongside the parade route, making sure everything went smoothly, helping with any problems that arose. It was perfect. She could do her job and watch the men at the same time. The parade route started at the north end of Main Street and ended at the town square. Floats, marching bands, community groups, all walking the half-mile stretch, while crowds watched from the sidewalks. It was a big event, drawing most of the town and lots of tourists. Violet arrived early to help Martha and the team with final preparations. The floats were lining up. The band was warming up. Children in costume were gathering with their parents. "Big day," Martha said cheerfully. "I think we'll have even more people than yesterday." "Probably," Violet said, scanning the growing crowd. At 1:45 p.m., she saw the 3 men arrive. They were together this time, standing on the sidewalk near the starting point. They seemed to be discussing something, occasionally gesturing toward the crowd. Violet walked past them casually, pretending to check on parade participants. She strained to hear their conversation. "Too many police," one of them said. "Backup plan." Another replied, "After dark. After dark." What did that mean? The parade ended around 4 p.m. The town would still be full of people in the evening, but there would be less official security. Fewer police officers on duty. Were they planning something for tonight? The parade began. Music played. Floats moved slowly down the street. Children waved. The crowd cheered. It was colorful and joyful, exactly what a small-town festival should be. But Violet barely noticed. She was tracking the three men. They had split up again, positioning themselves at different points along the route. But this time, they weren't watching children as intently. They were watching the police, the crowd control, the security setup. They were studying the response, learning how the town protected its people, looking for weaknesses. Violet's heart raced. These men were professionals. They weren't going to make stupid mistakes. They were patient, careful, methodical. They would wait for the right moment. The parade ended without incident. The crowds dispersed. Martha thanked Violet for her help and said she could go home. Tomorrow's garden show didn't require as much staffing. But Violet wasn't going home. She needed to follow these men again. See where they went. Find out what they were planning for after dark. She went back to her car and drove to the Pinewood Lodge. She parked where she could see the entrance and waited. At 5:30 p.m., the three men came out together. They got into the gray minivan and drove away. Violet followed at a safe distance. The minivan headed out of town onto a country road that led into the mountains. Where were they going? Violet kept following. The road wound through forests and past streams. After about 15 minutes, the minivan turned onto a narrow dirt road. Violet slowed down. She couldn't follow too closely, or they'd notice her. She drove past the turn, went another quarter-mile, then pulled over. She got out of her car and walked back through the trees, staying off the road, moving quietly. She reached the dirt road and followed it on foot. After a few hundred yards, she saw the minivan parked near an old abandoned cabin. The three men were standing outside the cabin, talking. Violet crept closer, hiding behind trees and bushes. She pulled out her camera and started taking pictures. The men were discussing something, gesturing, pointing at a map spread out on the hood of the minivan. She wished she could hear what they were saying, but she was too far away, and the sound of wind in the trees masked their voices. One of the men went into the cabin. He came back out a minute later, carrying something. Violet zoomed in with her camera. It was a duffel bag. He opened it, and even from this distance, Violet could see what was inside. Rope, duct tape, zip ties, restraints. Her blood went cold. This was it. This was the proof. These men were planning to kidnap children. She took more pictures. The men loaded the duffel bag into the minivan. They talked for another few minutes, then got back in the vehicle. Violet ran back through the woods to her car. She had to beat them back to town. She couldn't let them know she had followed them. She drove fast, taking the curves carefully. She reached town just ahead of them and parked in a different location. She watched as the minivan returned to the hotel lot. Then she drove straight to the police station. Chief Morrison was in his office when Violet arrived. She knocked urgently on his door. "Miss Brennan," he said, looking up from his desk. "What can I do for you?" Violet sat down across from him and pulled out her camera. "Chief, I followed those three men today. They drove to an abandoned cabin in the mountains. They had supplies, rope, duct tape, restraints. They're planning a kidnapping. Multiple kidnappings, probably. I have photos." She showed him the pictures on her camera screen. Morrison leaned forward, studying them carefully. His expression grew serious. "How did you get these?" he asked. "I followed them." I watched from a distance. "That was dangerous and foolish," Morrison said, but his tone wasn't angry, just concerned. "If they had seen you—" "I was careful. I'm trained for this, remember?" Morrison sat back in his chair. "Okay, this is good evidence. These items, the rope and tape, could indicate planning for a crime. Combined with their suspicious behavior at the festival, I think I can justify bringing them in for questioning." "When?" Violet asked. "Tonight. I'll send officers to the hotel. We'll question them separately, see if their stories match. If we can find any contradictions or evidence of conspiracy, we can hold them." "What about the minivan?" "They're probably storing the supplies in there." "Good point. I'll get a warrant to search it." Morrison picked up his phone and started making calls. Violet felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, action. Finally, someone taking this seriously. But Morrison held up a hand. "Don't get too hopeful yet. They haven't actually committed a crime. All I can do is question them. If they lawyer up and stay silent, I'll have to let them go. And the supplies you saw, they could claim they're for camping or some other innocent purpose." "They're not innocent," Violet said firmly. "I believe you. But believing and proving are different things. I need more. I need to know who they really are, why they're here, what their actual plan is." "Then let me keep investigating," Violet said. "I can watch them, follow them, gather more evidence." Morrison shook his head. "No, it's too dangerous. These men are clearly professionals. If they're planning what you think they're planning, they won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way. You're a civilian now, Violet. You don't have backup or protection." "I don't care," Violet said. "I can't just sit by and—" "You won't be sitting by," Morrison interrupted. "You've already done more than anyone could expect. You identified the threat. You gathered evidence. You brought it to me. Now let the police handle it. That's our job." Violet wanted to argue, but she could see Morrison's mind was made up. She nodded slowly. "Okay. But please, Chief, don't let them go. Don't give them a chance to hurt anyone." "I won't," Morrison promised. Violet left the police station feeling both relieved and frustrated. Relieved that the police were finally taking action. Frustrated that she couldn't do more herself. She drove home and made dinner, but she couldn't eat. She kept checking her phone, hoping for an update from Morrison. None came. At 8 o'clock, she couldn't take the waiting anymore. She drove back into town and parked near the police station. She saw 3 police cars parked outside. Morrison and his officers were inside, probably questioning the suspects. Violet waited in her car. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, at 10 o'clock, the police station doors opened. Officers led the 3 men out in handcuffs and put them in separate patrol cars. They were being arrested. Violet felt a surge of triumph. She had done it. She had stopped them. She drove home and finally allowed herself to relax. She took a hot shower, made tea, and sat on her porch, looking at the stars. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. But her relief didn't last long. Around midnight, her phone rang. It was Chief Morrison. "Violet, we have a problem," he said without preamble. "We had to let them go." "What? Why?" "Their lawyer showed up, an expensive one from the city. They refused to answer any questions. And when we searched the minivan, there was nothing in it. No rope, no tape, no supplies. Nothing suspicious at all." Violet's heart sank. "But I saw them. They had those supplies. I believe you. But they must have ditched them somewhere. Or maybe they never put them in the minivan. Either way, we have no evidence. We can't hold them. So they're just free for now, but I've warned them. I told them we're watching them. I told them to stay away from the festival events. Legally, they can refuse, but most criminals back off when police are paying attention. These aren't most criminals, Violet said. They're professionals. They won't back off. They'll just get more careful. Morrison sighed. I know. Which is why I'm keeping officers on alert all weekend. Tomorrow's garden show and Sunday's concert, we'll have extra security. If these men make any move, we'll be there. But that might not be enough, Violet said. Chief, please, let me help. Let me keep watching them. Absolutely not. Violet, listen to me. These men know you interfered with them at the Children's Day event. They've probably figured out you were following them today. You're on their radar now. If you keep pursuing this, you'll become a target yourself. Stay home, stay safe. Let us handle it. But that's an order. Well, not an order since you don't work for me. But it's strong advice. Do you understand? Violet wanted to argue, but she heard the genuine concern in Morrison's voice. I understand. Good. Get some sleep. I'll call you if anything develops. They hung up. Violet sat in the darkness of her living room, feeling helpless and angry. The men were free. They were still out there, still planning. And the festival was almost over. They were running out of time. If they were going to act, it would be soon. Tomorrow was Saturday, the garden show. It was a smaller event, mostly adults interested in plants and gardening, not many children. But Sunday was the closing concert. Hundreds of families would attend. Children would be running around in the evening darkness. It would be chaos. The perfect opportunity for the men to make their move. Violet made a decision. She was not going to stay home. She was not going to sit safely while children were in danger. Chief Morrison might think she was just a civilian, but she was more than that. She was a former detective with specialized training. She had stopped criminals before. She could do it again. She would go to the concert tomorrow. She would watch. And if those men tried anything, she would stop them. Whatever it took.
Saturday arrived with gray clouds and the threat of rain. Violet slept poorly, waking every hour, her mind churning with scenarios and plans. By 7 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and made coffee. The garden show was being held in the town park, a beautiful green space with walking paths, flower beds, and a small amphitheater. It would run from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Martha had told Violet she didn't need to work today. The garden show was staffed by members of the local gardening club, but Violet planned to attend anyway. Not to look at plants, to watch for the three men. She dressed casually and drove into town around 9:30. The park was already being set up with vendor tents, display tables, and information booths. Violet parked and walked through the park, pretending to be an interested visitor while actually surveying the layout and crowd. The garden show attracted a different demographic than the earlier events. Mostly older adults, serious plant enthusiasts, couples looking for landscaping ideas. There were some families with children, but not many. If the three men were planning to grab kids, this wasn't the ideal event for it. Still, Violet walked around for an hour, scanning faces. She didn't see the men. Maybe Morrison's warning had worked. Maybe they had left town. Or maybe they were laying low, waiting for tomorrow's concert. The garden show was pleasant but uneventful. Violet looked at roses and daisies, listened to a talk about organic composting, ate a sandwich from the food truck. All the while she remained alert, watching. By 3 o'clock, she was reasonably confident the men weren't there. She decided to drive to the Pinewood Lodge and see if their minivan was still in the parking lot. It was. The gray minivan sat in the same spot as before, so the men were still in town, still planning something. Violet found a spot where she could watch the hotel entrance without being too obvious. She waited. At 4:30, all three men emerged from the hotel together. They were dressed nicely, button-down shirts, khakis, like they were going somewhere formal. They got into the minivan and drove away. Violet followed. The minivan drove to a restaurant on the edge of town, a nice place called the Mountain View Grill. The men went inside. Violet parked and watched the entrance. Were they just having dinner? Or meeting someone? She waited for 20 minutes, debating whether to go inside. Finally, she decided to risk it. She grabbed a light jacket from her car to change her appearance slightly and walked into the restaurant. It was busy. Most tables were full. Violet asked the hostess for a table for one. She was seated in a corner with a good view of most of the dining room. She spotted the three men at a table near the window. They were talking quietly, looking at something on a tablet computer. One of them, Marcus Webb, occasionally glanced around, checking to see if anyone was watching them. Violet kept her face turned slightly away, pretending to study the menu. She ordered soup and bread when the waiter came, keeping her meal simple so she could leave quickly if needed. From her peripheral vision, she watched the men. They seemed to be finalizing plans for something. Webb pointed at the tablet screen. Lane nodded. Curtis made notes on his phone. Then Curtis stood up and walked toward the restrooms. His path took him past Violet's table. She kept her eyes on her menu, but her heart pounded. Had he recognized her? He walked past without pausing. Violet exhaled slowly. When Curtis came back, the three men paid their bill and left. Violet wanted to follow, but she couldn't leave without paying her own bill first. By the time she got outside, the minivan was gone. Damn. She drove around town for a while looking for the minivan, but didn't find it. She finally gave up and went home. That evening, Violet tried to relax but couldn't. Tomorrow was Sunday, the final day of the festival, the closing concert. If the men were going to act, it would be tomorrow. She thought about calling Chief Morrison again, but what would she tell him? I saw them at a restaurant? That wasn't helpful. She needed a plan. She needed to be at that concert tomorrow, ready to intervene if necessary. But how? Morrison had told her to stay away. If she showed up, he would probably make her leave, unless she had a legitimate reason to be there. Violet called Martha. Hey, it's Violet. I know you said you didn't need me for tomorrow's concert, but I'd like to help anyway. I could do crowd management or security or whatever you need. Martha sounded surprised but pleased. Oh, that's sweet of you. Actually, we could use an extra person at the children's activity area. We're setting up games and face painting near the stage. It'll run for a couple hours before the concert starts. Perfect, Violet said. I'll be there. Great. Be there by 3. The concert starts at 6, but we're opening the activity area at 4. Violet hung up feeling slightly better. She would be there. She would have a reason to be there, and she would be ready. She spent the evening preparing. She packed a small bag with things she might need. Her phone, fully charged. A flashlight. A small first aid kit. A whistle. Pepper spray, she had. Bought it years ago after leaving the police force. She didn't have a gun. She hadn't carried one since the incident that ended her career. But she had other tools. Most importantly, she had her training and her determination. Before bed, she looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and gray streaked hair. She didn't look like a hero. She didn't look like someone who could stop 3 professional criminals. But appearances could be deceiving. You can do this, she told her reflection. You have to. Sunday arrived with beautiful weather. Clear skies, warm temperatures, a perfect evening for an outdoor concert. Violet felt both exhausted and wired, running on nervous energy and too much coffee. She dressed in comfortable clothes, jeans, sneakers, a dark blue polo shirt that looked official enough to blend in as staff. She put her hair in a ponytail and wore minimal makeup. She wanted to be able to move quickly if needed. At 2:30, she drove into town. The town square and surrounding streets were already bustling with activity. Food vendors were set up. The stage was ready. Sound technicians were testing equipment. Families were arriving early to get good spots. The concert featured a popular local band and a special guest musician. It was expected to draw the biggest crowd of the entire festival. At least 1,000 people, maybe more. Violet found Martha near the children's activity area. Tables were set up with coloring books, craft supplies, and simple games. A face painting station was ready. Balloon artists were inflating their first creations. Violet, thanks for coming. Martha gave her a quick hug. can you supervise the craft table? Just help kids with their projects, make sure they're having fun. Of course, so Violet said. The activity area opened at 4 o'clock. Children immediately flooded in, eager to play while their parents found seats for the concert. Violet helped them with crafts, all the while scanning the growing crowd. At 4:30, she saw them. All three men arriving separately but within minutes of each other. They positioned themselves around the town square, just as they had done before. But this time, their positions were even more strategic, near the exits, near the parking areas, near the darker side streets. Violet's pulse quickened. They were definitely planning something tonight. She looked around for police officers. She spotted Officer Bradley near the main stage and Officer Chen walking through the crowd. Good. But were two officers enough if something went wrong? She considered walking over to Bradley and telling him about the three men. But what would she say? They were just standing there, like everyone else. And Morrison had already questioned them and had to release them. No, she needed to catch them in the act. She needed to see them actually try to take a child. Only then would the police be able to arrest them. But that meant letting them get close enough to a child to make an attempt. It meant putting a child at risk. Violet's stomach churned. This was the impossible choice. Wait and hope the police spotted any danger, or intervene early and potentially let the men escape. At 5 o'clock, the craft activities began to wind down. Children left to join their families for the concert. The sun was getting lower, creating long shadows. The band would start playing at 6, and then it would be dark by 7:30.
Violet helped Martha clean up the activity area. As she worked, she kept watching the three men. They were moving now, slowly circulating through the crowd. They seemed to be looking for something, or someone. Then Violet realized they were looking for her. Of course. They knew she had been interfering with them. They had probably figured out she was the one who followed them to the cabin. They wanted to know where she was, whether she was here tonight. Violet turned away, keeping her face hidden. She needed to be less visible. She told Martha she was going to walk around and check on things, then moved into the crowd. The concert started at 6 o'clock. The band played upbeat folk rock music. People clapped and danced. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. The atmosphere was joyful and celebratory, but Violet felt only dread. The sun was setting, darkness was coming, and somewhere in this crowd, three men were planning to steal children. At 6:30, during a break between songs, Violet saw movement that caught her attention. One of the men, Stephen Curtis, was talking to a young boy, maybe 9 years old. The boy looked lost, confused. Curtis was pointing toward the parking area. Number. Violet moved quickly through the crowd. She reached them just as Curtis put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Excuse me?" Violet said loudly, stepping between them. "Are you lost, honey?" "Let's find your parents." Curtis's face darkened. "I was just helping him. He's looking for his mom." "I'll take it from here," Violet said firmly. She took the boy's hand. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go to the police officer over there. He'll help us." She walked the boy toward Officer Bradley, glancing back once. Curtis was standing there, watching them, his expression cold and angry. She had interfered again. Now they definitely knew she was on to them. Violet brought the boy to Officer Bradley and explained the situation. Bradley called the boy's name over the loudspeaker, and within a minute, his frantic mother came running. There were tears and hugs and thanks. "That's the second time you've spotted trouble," Bradley said to Violet. "Good work." "It's not over," Violet said. "Those three men are still here. They're going to try again." "Chief Morrison told me about them," Bradley said. "I'll keep watch." "You should probably head home, though. Morrison doesn't want you getting involved." "I'm already involved," Violet said. "And I'm not leaving." Bradley looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. Instead, he spoke into his radio, alerting the other officers about the three men. The concert resumed. The sun set completely. Stage lights illuminated the band, but the rest of the town square was dim, lit only by street lights and the scattered glow from nearby businesses. This was it. This was when the men would make their move, in the darkness and confusion of the concert crowd. Violet positioned herself where she could see most of the square. Her eyes had adjusted to the dimness. She scanned the crowd constantly, looking for the three men, looking for children who might be vulnerable. At 7:45, she saw something. Two of the men, Webb and Lane, were moving through the crowd toward the same area, near the edge of the square where it bordered a dark side street. They were converging on something. Violet pushed through the crowd, trying to see what they were focused on. Then she saw a little girl, maybe 7 years old, standing alone near a food truck. She had a balloon in one hand and looked around uncertainly, probably looking for her parents. Webb reached the girl first. He crouched down, smiling, saying something to her. The girl looked uncertain but not frightened. He looked like a friendly adult. Lane approached from the other side, casually, as if he just happened to be walking by. Violet's heart hammered. They were going to take her, right now. Webb would lead her away, Lane would help, and Curtis was probably waiting with the minivan nearby. Violet ran. She shoved through the crowd, not caring who she bumped into. She reached the girl just as Webb was taking her hand. "Get away from her!" Violet shouted. Webb looked up, startled, then angry. "I'm just helping her find her parents." "No, you're not." Violet grabbed the girl and pulled her close. "You're trying to kidnap her." "You're crazy," Webb said, standing up. People nearby were turning to look, drawn by the commotion. "I'm doing nothing wrong." Lane had stopped a few feet away, watching. Officer Bradley appeared, pushing through the crowd. "What's going on here?" "This woman is harassing me," Webb said quickly. "I was trying to help a lost child and she assaulted me." "He's lying," Violet said. "He and his partners are child predators. They've been planning this all week." "That's ridiculous," Webb said. "I'm a tourist." "I was just trying to be helpful." The little girl started crying. More people gathered, forming a circle around them. The music had stopped. The band was looking over, trying to see what the disruption was. "Officer, I can prove these men are working together," Violet said. "That one," she pointed at Lane, "is his partner, and there's a third man somewhere nearby." Bradley spoke into his radio. "Need backup at the east side of the square. Possible attempted abduction." Webb's expression shifted. Just for a moment, Violet saw calculation in his eyes. He was deciding whether to run, whether to fight, whether to try to talk his way out. Then Chief Morrison appeared with Officer Chen, 3 police officers now. Webb was outnumbered. "Mr. Webb," Morrison said, "we meet again. Funny how you keep ending up near children in distress." "I told you I was just trying to help," Webb said, but his confident tone had faltered. "Where's your friend?" Morrison asked, gesturing toward Lane. "The one standing over there watching this whole thing." That doesn't look suspicious at all. Lane realized he'd been spotted. He turned and started walking away quickly. "Stop!" Chen called out. "Police! Stop!" Lane ran. Chen chased after him. The crowd scattered, creating chaos. Children screamed. Parents grabbed their kids. The band on stage stood up, trying to see what was happening. Morrison grabbed Webb by the arm. "You're not going anywhere." "Bradley, cuff him." As Bradley put handcuffs on Webb, Violet scanned the crowd for Curtis. Where was he? Then she saw. Curtis was running toward the parking area, and he wasn't alone. He was dragging a struggling boy, maybe 10 years old, his hand clamped over the boy's mouth. "There!" Violet shouted, pointing. But the police were occupied with Webb, and Chen was still chasing Lane. No one else saw what Violet saw. She ran after Curtis. She was nearly 50 years old, not as fast as she used to be, but adrenaline pushed her forward. Curtis was heading for the parking lot, where the gray minivan was probably waiting. Violet reached them just as Curtis got to the lot. She grabbed the boy and tried to pull him away from Curtis. "Let him go!" she shouted. Curtis didn't let go. He was bigger and stronger than Violet. He yanked the boy back, and Violet stumbled but didn't release her grip. They struggled. The boy was crying, terrified. Violet felt Curtis's strength, his desperation. He was going to get away. He was going to take this child. Number. Not while she still had breath in her body. Violet did something she hadn't done in 10 years. She shifted her weight, used Curtis's momentum against him, and executed a defensive move from her police training. She swept his leg and pushed hard. Curtis fell backward, losing his grip on the boy. "Run!" Violet told the boy. "Run to the police!" The boy took off, running back toward the town square, shouting for help. Curtis got up, his face twisted with rage. "You're dead!" He snarled at Violet. He came at her. Violet backed up, her hand going to the pepper spray in her pocket. But before she could use it, Curtis grabbed her and slammed her against a parked car. Pain exploded through Violet's back. She gasped for air. Curtis's hands went around her throat. She couldn't breathe. Black spots appeared in her vision. She clawed at his hands, but he was too strong. "This is how it ends," she thought distantly. "I stopped them, but I won't survive it." Then suddenly, Curtis's hands released. He staggered backward. Officer Bradley was there, pulling Curtis away, forcing him to the ground. Violet collapsed, coughing, gasping for air. Her throat burned. But she was alive. More officers arrived. They handcuffed Curtis. Officer Chen appeared with Lane in custody. All 3 men were captured. Violet sat on the ground, trying to catch her breath. Chief Morrison came over and crouched down beside her. "Ambulance is on the way," he said gently. "Are you okay?" Violet nodded, still coughing. "The boy? He's fine. His parents have him. He's scared but unhurt. Because of you." "The other children?" Violet managed to rasp out. "All safe. Everyone's safe." Morrison's expression was serious. "Violet, what you did was incredibly brave and incredibly reckless. You could have been killed." "Had to stop them." Violet gasped. "You did. You absolutely did. We have all 3 men in custody. This time, they're not getting out. Attempted kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, they're done." Violet felt tears on her face. Relief, exhaustion, pain, all mixing together. She had done it. She had protected the children. She had stopped the men. The ambulance arrived. Paramedics checked Violet over. Her throat was badly bruised but not seriously damaged. She had some cuts and scrapes from the fight. Otherwise, she was okay. Chief Morrison insisted she go to the hospital for observation. Violet didn't argue. She was too tired to argue. As the ambulance drove away, she looked back at the town square. The concert had been canceled. Police were taking statements from witnesses. Parents were holding their children close, grateful that everyone was safe. And Violet finally allowed herself to feel proud. She had faced her fears. She had used her old skills for good. She had saved lives. She was a hero, even if she had never wanted to be one again. Violet spent the night in the hospital under observation. The doctors confirmed that her injuries were relatively minor: severe bruising on her throat, some contusions on her back, and general shock to her system. They wanted to keep her overnight to make sure there were no complications. She slept fitfully, her mind replaying the events over and over, the look of terror on that boy's face, Curtis's hands around her throat, the moment she thought she might die. But also, The relief when Bradley pulled Curtis off her. The realization that the children were safe. The knowledge that she had made a difference. In the morning, a nurse brought her breakfast and told her she had visitors. Martha came in first, carrying a huge bouquet of flowers. "Oh, Violet," Martha exclaimed, tears in her eyes. "You scared us all to death. But you're a hero. Everyone in town is talking about what you did." "I just did what I had to do," Violet said, her voice still hoarse and painful. "You saved that little boy. And probably many others. The police chief told me those men were planning to kidnap multiple children. If you hadn't stopped them." Martha shook her head, unable to finish the thought. Officer Bradley came next, with Chief Morrison. They both looked serious. "How are you feeling?" Morrison asked. "Sore, but alive." Morrison nodded. "Good. I need to ask you some questions if you're up to it." For the official report. Violet spent the next hour giving her statement. She described everything she had observed over the past week. The men's suspicious behavior, their surveillance of children, the supplies at the cabin, the rental van, and finally, the attempted kidnappings at the concert. "You should have told me all of this earlier," Morrison said, though his tone was more sad than angry. "When you followed them to that cabin, when you saw the supplies, that was the moment to come to me." "I did come to you," Violet said. "You questioned them and had to let them go." "Because they had ditched the evidence. If you had told me immediately, we might have caught them with it." "Maybe," Violet admitted. "I'm sorry. I was thinking like a detective, trying to build a case. I should have just thought about stopping them immediately." Morrison sighed. "Well, we've got them now. All three are in custody. They're not talking, but they don't need to. We have multiple witnesses to the attempted kidnappings, and we found the supplies in a storage unit they had rented. Rope, duct tape, sedatives, everything." "Do you know who they really are?" Violet asked. "Those names they gave you, Webb, Lane, Curtis, I'm sure they're fake." "You're right. We're working with the FBI now. Apparently, these men are part of a larger criminal network that operates across multiple states. They target festivals and large events, looking for opportunities to grab children. They're human traffickers." Violet felt sick. Human trafficking. Children stolen and sold. It was one of the worst crimes she could imagine. "How many children have they taken?" she asked quietly. "We don't know yet. The investigation is ongoing. But Violet, you stopped them. Whatever they've done in the past, they won't do again. You made sure of that." After Morrison and Bradley left, Violet was finally released from the hospital. Martha drove her home. The ride was quiet. Violet was too tired to talk much, and Martha seemed to sense that she needed peace. When they arrived at Violet's house, Martha helped her inside. "Do you need anything? Groceries? Help with chores?" "I'm fine, really. I just need to rest." "Okay. Call me if you need anything." "And Violet, thank you. From all of us. You're a real hero." After Martha left, Violet took a long, hot bath. Her muscles ached, but the heat helped. She looked at the bruises on her throat in the mirror, dark purple marks in the shape of Curtis's fingers. They would heal. Everything would heal eventually. She put on comfortable clothes and lay down on her couch. She thought she would sleep, but instead she found herself thinking about the past. About her last case as a detective 10 years ago. It had been a kidnapping case. A 5-year-old girl taken from her front yard. Violet had been the lead detective. She and her partner had tracked the kidnapper to an abandoned warehouse. They had moved in to make the arrest. But something went wrong. The kidnapper had a gun. There was a confrontation. Shots were fired. Violet's partner was killed. The little girl died in the crossfire. And Violet survived, physically uninjured. but broken inside. She had left the force immediately. She couldn't be a detective anymore. The guilt, the trauma, the nightmares, they were too much. She ran away to Pinewood, to a quiet life, to a job where she entertained children instead of trying to save them. But this week, she had been forced to face her past. And in facing it, she had discovered something important. She could still be the person she used to be, the hero she used to be. The trauma hadn't destroyed that part of her. It had only been hiding. Maybe it was time to stop running.
Over the next few days, Violet received visitors constantly. Townspeople came by with food, flowers, and thanks. The parents of the children she had protected wanted to meet her and express their gratitude. The mayor came and offered her a commendation from the town council. The local newspaper ran a story. Festival hero, former detective stops kidnappers. Violet gave a brief interview but tried to downplay her role. She wasn't looking for fame or glory. She had just done what needed to be done. A week after the incident, Chief Morrison called and asked her to come to the police station. When she arrived, he led her to his office and closed the door. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better." "The bruises are fading. My voice is almost back to normal." "Good. Listen, I have something to discuss with you." Morrison sat down behind his desk. "I've been thinking about this for days. Our department is small, just 12 officers for the whole town. We handle basic stuff, traffic violations, petty theft, the occasional domestic dispute. We're not equipped for major crimes." "That's normal for a small town," Violet said. "True. But what happened last week showed me that we need more. We need someone with real investigative experience, someone who can spot threats before they become disasters. Someone like you." Violet blinked. "Are you offering me a job?" "Yes. I want you to join the Pinewood Police Department. Not as a regular officer, as a detective and consultant. You'd help with investigations, train our officers in threat assessment, and serve as a resource when we need someone with your expertise." Violet was speechless for a moment. A year ago, even a week ago, she would have refused immediately. The idea of being a cop again, of carrying that responsibility, would have terrified her. But now, "I don't know if I can," she said slowly. "My last case, it ended badly. I've been carrying that for 10 years. I'm not sure I'm ready to—" "I know about your last case," Morrison interrupted gently. "After you came to me with your concerns about those men, I did some research. I looked into your background. I found out what happened in Metro City." Violet tensed. "Then you know why I can't—" "I know that you were a good detective who faced a terrible situation. I know that a child died and your partner died and you felt responsible. But Violet, it wasn't your fault. You did everything right. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, tragedy happens." "I couldn't save them," Violet whispered. "No, but you've saved others since then. That little girl at the festival, Emma, the boy who almost got taken to the parking lot. Who knows how many other children you protected by stopping those men before they could act? You can't bring back the ones you lost, but you can honor them by continuing to fight for the ones who are still here." Violet felt tears on her face. She had never looked at it that way. She had spent a decade punishing herself for one failure. She hadn't allowed herself to see all the good she had done, both in her past career and this past week. "Think about it," Morrison said. "You don't have to decide right now. Take your time. But I believe you could make a real difference here. We need someone like you." Violet drove home slowly, thinking about Morrison's offer. A part of her wanted to accept immediately, but another part, the scared, traumatized part, wanted to refuse and go back to her safe, simple life. That evening, she sat on her porch and watched the sunset. The mountains glowed golden in the fading light. Birds sang in the trees. Everything was peaceful. But Violet realized something. She didn't want peace anymore. Not if it meant hiding from who she really was. She had been a good detective. She could be one again. She pulled out her phone and called Chief Morrison. "I'll take the job," she said when he answered. "When do I start?" Morrison laughed. "How about Monday? That gives you a few more days to recover." "Monday it is." After she hung up, Violet felt something she hadn't felt in 10 years: hope and a purpose. Violet stood in her new office at the Pinewood Police Department. It was small but comfortable, with a desk, a computer, and a window looking out at Main Street. A nameplate on her desk read, Detective Violet Brennan.
She had been working here for 3 weeks now. It had been an adjustment, learning the department's procedures, meeting all the officers, getting back into the rhythm of police work. But it felt right. It felt like coming home. Her first official case had been investigating a string of burglaries at vacation homes on the outskirts of town. She had solved it within a week, identifying the culprit as a local teenager who needed money for college. It wasn't a dramatic case, but it reminded her that detective work wasn't always about life and death situations. Sometimes it was just about helping people and keeping the community safe. Chief Morrison had assigned her a partner, a young officer named Sarah Patel, fresh from the police academy. Sarah was enthusiastic and eager to learn. She reminded Violet of herself 20 years ago. The trial for the 3 kidnappers, whose real names turned out to be Thomas Greer, Robert Hackett, and Paul Kemp, was scheduled for next month. The FBI had built a strong case. Violet would have to testify, reliving that night at the festival. But she was ready. She had faced her fears and won. Martha from Pinewood Party Planning had been understanding about Violet leaving the company. "I always knew you were meant for more than balloon animals," Martha had said with a smile. "But anytime you want to visit and entertain the kids, you're welcome." Violet had promised to stop by occasionally. She had grown fond of the job, even if it wasn't her true calling. As she sat at her desk, reviewing case files, Officer Bradley knocked on her door. "Detective?" "We just got a call about a suspicious person near the elementary school. Probably nothing, but given what happened last month, the principal wants us to check it out." "Let's go," Violet said, standing up and grabbing her jacket. They drove to the school. The principal met them outside and pointed to a man sitting in a parked car across the street. He had been there for over an hour, just watching the playground. Violet and Bradley approached the car. The man saw them coming and quickly drove away. "Did you get the license plate?" Violet asked. "Got it," Bradley said, writing it down. They went back to the station and ran the plate. The car was registered to a man with multiple arrests for stalking and harassment. A quick search revealed he had recently been released from prison and was supposed to be staying at least 500 feet from any school. Within an hour, Violet and her team had located the man and arrested him for violating his parole. Another child potentially saved. Another threat stopped before it could grow. As Violet filed her report that evening, she thought about how much her life had changed in just 1 month. She had gone from a fearful, isolated woman to a confident detective again. She had faced her trauma and found strength on the other side of it. She wasn't the same person she had been 10 years ago. She never would be. The scars from her past would always be there. But scars were proof that you had survived, that you had healed, that you were stronger than whatever hurt you. 1 year later, Violet stood on the stage in the town square. It was spring again, and the annual Spring Festival was about to begin with the opening ceremony. But this year, there was an extra element to the ceremony. Mayor Richardson was presenting Violet with the Pinewood Citizen of the Year award. "Violet Brennan came to our town looking for peace and quiet," the mayor said into the microphone. "Instead, she found her calling. She saved countless children from a terrible fate. She brought criminals to justice. And she continues to serve our community with dedication and skill every single day. It is my honor to present her with this award." The crowd applauded. Violet accepted the plaque, feeling both proud and embarrassed by the attention. She gave a brief speech, thanking the town, thanking Chief Morrison and the police department, thanking Martha for giving her a chance when she first arrived, and she thanked the people of Pinewood for accepting her and making her feel at home. I'm not a hero, she concluded. I'm just someone who believes in protecting people and doing what's right. We all have that capacity inside us. We all can be heroes when it matters. More applause. Then the festival began, with music and laughter and children running around happily, safely, protected. Violet stepped down from the stage and was immediately swarmed by people congratulating her. She smiled and thanked them, but her eyes kept scanning the crowd. Old habits died hard. She was always watching, always alert for danger. But today, there was no danger, just joy and community and life. Chief Morrison came over and shook her hand. Good speech, Detective. Thanks, Chief. You know, the state police have been asking about you. They want to know if you'd be interested in joining their major crimes unit. It would be a promotion, more money, more interesting cases. Violet thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. No, I'm happy here. Pinewood is my home now. I was hoping you'd say that, Morrison said with a smile. We need you here. As the sun set and the festival continued, Violet walked through the town she had protected. She had found something here that she thought she'd lost forever: purpose, community, and redemption. She had been broken, but she had healed. She had been afraid, but she had found courage. She had been running from her past, but she had learned to face it. And in the process, she had saved lives. She had made a difference. She had become the person she was always meant to be. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. A hero in clown's clothing who had finally taken off the costume and embraced her true identity. And she was ready for whatever came next. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most, and where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.